Course Outcome 2. Describe Canadian cultural values and beliefs. Learning outcomes. Describe the dimensions of culture. Analyze the differences between power distance and individualism versus collectivism. Differentiate between high versus low context, uncertainty avoidance and long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. Differentiate between masculinity versus femininity, indulgence versus restraint. Cultural values and beliefs. Cultural values are the core principles and ideals upon which an entire community exists and protect and rely upon for existence and harmonious relationship. Values are culture's standard for discerning what is good and just in society. Values are deeply embedded and critical for transmitting and teaching a culture's beliefs. Cultural values can be shared across multiple cultures, regardless of geographical location. For example, many countries in Asia have the same cultural values based on strong familial connections. Cultural beliefs are beliefs that are learned and shared across groups of people. Beliefs are the tenets or convictions that people hold to be true. Individuals in a society have specific beliefs, but they also share collective values. To illustrate the difference, Americans commonly believe in the American dream, that anyone who works hard enough will be successful and wealthy. Underlying this belief is the American value that wealth is good and important. The culture wheel. Cultural norms observed in Canadian society. Cultural norms observed in Canadian society include egalitarianism, punctuality, love for the environment, informality, individualistic yet community-oriented, regionalism, order and space, respect, and political correctness. Hofstede's cultural models. Who is Geert Hofstede? Gerard Hendrik Geert Hofstede was a Dutch organizational psychologist who is famous for his development of the Hofstede cultural dimensions. This organizational culture model can help to identify cultural differences. The 6D model of national culture. Geert Hofstede, assisted by others, came up with 6 basic issues that society needs to come to terms with in order to organize itself. These are called dimensions of culture. Each of them has been expressed on a scale that runs roughly from 0 to 100. Each dimension has been derived by comparing many, but not all, countries in the world. The findings can be summarized into 6 world maps of the distribution of that dimension. Individualism Collectivism. Individualism is the extent to which people feel independent as opposed to being interdependent as members of larger wholes. Individualism does not mean egoism. It means that individual choices and decisions are expected. Collectivism does not mean closeness. It means that one knows one's place in life, which is determined socially. With a metaphor from physics, people in an individualistic society are more like atoms flying around in a gas, while those in collectivist societies are more like atoms fixed in a crystal. Power distance. One of the most salient aspects of inequality is the degree of power each person exerts or can exert over other persons. Power being defined as the degree to which a person is able to influence other people's ideas and behavior. This dimension deals with the fact that all individuals in societies are not equal, and it expresses the attitude of the culture toward these power inequalities amongst us. Power distance is defined as the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. It has to do with the fact that the society's inequality is endorsed by the followers as much as by the leaders. Uncertainty avoidance. Uncertainty avoidance deals with the society's tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. Uncertainty avoidance has nothing to do with the risk avoidance, nor with following rules. It has to do with anxiety and distrust in the face of the unknown, and conversely, with the wish to have fixed habits and rituals and to know the truth. Masculinity Femininity. A high score or masculine on this dimension indicates that the society will be driven by competition, achievement, and success, with success being defined by the winner or best in the field. This value system starts in childhood and continues throughout one's life, both in work and leisure pursuits. A low score or feminine on the dimension means that the dominant values in society are caring for others and quality of life. A feminine society is one where quality of life is the sign of success and standing out from the crowd is not admirable. The fundamental issue here is what motivates people, wanting to be the best or masculine, or liking what you do, feminine. Short-term orientation, long-term orientation. This dimension describes how every society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with the challenges of the present and future, and societies prioritize these two existential goals differently. Long-term orientation tends to be characterized by a focus on the future, a focus on the perseverance and delays in short-term gratification for future benefit. Short-term orientation tends to be characterized by a pursuit of immediate gratification, fulfilling social obligations, and concern with social hierarchy. Indulgence Restraint. Indulgence stands for a society that allows relatively free gratification of basic and natural human drives related to enjoying life and having fun. Restraint stands for a society that suppresses gratification of needs and regulates it by means of strict social norms. This cultural dimension expresses the differences between the gratification's perspective versus control of essential human needs related to obtaining pleasure from life.
Hofstede's 6 Dimensions of Organizational Culture. At the end of the 60s, Geert Hofstede developed a culture dimension model with more than 110,000 employees from IBM based on a factor analysis, which initially consisted of 4 main dimensions, and Hofstede subsequently added 2 dimensions. The 6 dimensions are always to be taken in the form of alternatives. The 6 cultural dimensions are power distance, individualism and collectivism, masculinity and femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term or short-term orientation, and the last dimension is indulgence versus restraint. We will consider each individual cultural dimension by using an example in the following. Hofstede describes the cultural dimension of power distance as a subjectively perceived willingness to accept an unequal distribution of power in an organization. There is often a high power gap between the various hierarchy levels in very conservative structures. Accordingly, management makes decisions, and the result is passed on down. It is also necessary to maintain all communication channels and thus also the specified power structures. In startup companies or companies with modern management methods, there is often a culture of flat hierarchies and open communication between staff and management. The power distance is a theoretical action and a reason for potential applicants from Generation Y and Generation Z to choose one or the other employer. The second cultural dimension describes the collectivist or individualistic characteristics of an organization. In other words, the performance and self-realization of the individual are in the sense of organization above the feeling of we. I do what I do to reach my performance limits and develop personally, or is the collectivist idea in the foreground, for example, the us feeling. I do what I do to contribute to the overall performance support the team's goal. In Asian or Latin American companies, in particular, the collectivist idea is very pronounced, while in commission-dependent sales organizations, individualism is in the forefront. The third cultural dimension describes masculinity or femininity. It represents stereotypical values and behavioral norms that are typically male or female. However, you have to note that it is not about the actual frequency distribution of the sexes, but about typically male behavior such as domination and competition. However, this behavior is not only found in men. It is also found in women. Femininity is displayed through values such as caring, cooperation, and modesty from importance, which can be traits found in men as well. The fourth dimension is the uncertainty of avoidance. This is about the openness to new things or the opposite, i.e., fear of change. Suppose one culture recognizes opportunities in changes and takes risks in return. In that case, other cultures persist in their status quo and reject the fear or uncertainty of change processes or only go along in a very weakened form. The fifth dimension is the dimension of the long or short-term directions. The landing or short-term orientation indicates how long the planning horizon is in a society. Standards and values that go hand in hand with long-term orientation are frugality and perseverance. However, values that point to a short-term organization are selfishness and flexibility. Finally, the sixth and final cultural dimension, indulgence and restraint. This dimension is still relatively new and describes the potential achievement of happiness through the perception of self-control for oneself and one's life in contrast to an externally determined way of living one's life. Transferred to companies, you can call yourself the freedom to develop in the free economy as it suits you, depending on the ability to discipline yourself. While as a civil servant at the post office, for example, you have to adhere to a rigorous career path. You can only change it slightly. These were the 6 dimensions of organizational culture by Geert Hofstede.